Hello, everyone. We are very pleased that you can join us today for this webinar. My name is Astrid, and I'm happy to welcome you again to the Future Studio Discussion Club. As many of you know, here in Future Studio, we are discussing everything related to the future of Armenia and the world. As you may know, we decided to launch a series of the webinars under the umbrella COVID-19 Defying Universal Fear. We started discussing how the virus affects our lives in various aspects, and especially healthcare industry. Different experts of healthcare from different countries joined us to help people to deal with fear. I want to mention that this series of webinars are prepared by Future Studio and powered by Foundation of Armenian Science and Technologies. Today, we continue the discussion with Dr. Shakeh Kaftarian, a psychologist, co-president of the Armenian American Mental Health Association of Southern California. Dr. Kaftarian, together with Dr. Jane Mahakian, a gerontologist who specializes in helping adults and their families with cognitive impairments, founder of Alzheimer Care Armenia. They will tell us about psychological impact of isolation on the family. We are very glad to host you, Shakeh Jan, with Dr. Mahakian in Future Studio. Dear viewers, as always, you can send your questions to us through the Zoom chat or via comments on Facebook live streaming. Now, dear speakers, the stage is all yours, please.
Thank you, Astrid. Thank you for this introduction, and thank you to Future Studios for hosting us. My colleague, Dr. Mahakian, and I are very happy to be here with you and with your audience. And yes, we are going to talk about the impact of COVID-19. COVID stands for coronavirus disease 19, the 19th version of this virus that has impacted all of us globally. This is something that has no particular location in terms of its impact, no particular country, no particular continent even. This is a uniform and universal experience, and it has many ramifications and an impact that cuts across the world. So today, my colleague, Dr. Jane Mahakian, and I are going to look at the impact, the psychological and emotional impact of this disease, of the pandemic experience. And we're going to talk about how it really impacts and affects different age groups, different people from that are in different stages of development in their lives. And then we're going to focus on what we should all do in terms of reducing the negative impact of this experience, and what it is that we can do to create a new normal for ourselves and for our families that will be effective in traveling through this pandemic until new normalcy sets in. So, Dr. Jane, let's talk about why it's difficult for people to handle this pandemic. Why is it that we are so impacted by this? Would you like to start the conversation?
Thank you, Dr. Kaftarian. Thank you. You know, these are very difficult times, as everybody knows, and we've never experienced anything like this before in our life. And because there are so many unknowns, that ambiguity creates a lot of anxiety, it creates fear, and it can create depression. This pandemic has caused us all on many levels to experience loss. And those losses and that sense of safety, our social connection, as well as our financial security, have all been uprooted, shall we say. It's a crisis. And this crisis has created a psychological one. We're all losing things. We're all losing something. And this mandated isolation has greatly impacted all of us, especially those who are most vulnerable, would be the older person. That older person living alone is a much higher risk because their social world has become very small.
Right, you're absolutely right. There are many uncertainties attached to this experience. Starting out, we really didn't know that much about how it spread, what it does to the body, what are the short and long-term impacts of this disease. We're beginning to understand more and more as to what this disease can do, how it spreads, thus the physical separation that is almost mandated across the world and is now very gradually beginning to lift off. And all of these elements together are creating this lack of certainty, feelings of people are unsure about what's happening and what will happen later on. And then grief and loss that you mentioned are real issues, of course, for this. Let's talk a little bit about different age groups, children, teens. You started talking about the elderly. I would like to say a few words about children. You know, when this happened in the beginning, children were very happy to be home and not have to go to school, etc. And after a few days, at the most after a couple of weeks, a major boredom started setting in. They had to do their studies at home, and they were disconnected from their social groups, from their friends. They couldn't go out, run around and do their sports, or they couldn't continue their usual life patterns. So these were the changes that a child's world had to go through. Let's talk a little bit about what happens to the elderly, the other end of the spectrum.
So the elderly, that older person, is really at risk. They're at risk because of many times physical mobility. They've lost autonomy, that increased vulnerability, and the fear that they're experiencing from being cut off socially is impacting them. They many times feel hopeless and helpless, and every person is going to react differently. And every person, as you know, Dr. Kaftarian, has a different social network. It may be not as rich as the next person. It's for them, it really becomes more of what can the family do to create a sense of normalcy for that older person. If the older person is living in their home alone, many times the adult children are now having that loved one, their parent, live with them or grandparent live with them. So that depression and that anxiety is supported and reduced by the family many times.
Has to do with the fact that when older folks who, based on necessity or based on anxiety, have to come back and live with their children again, then the family dynamic changes, right? And that is a huge issue. We'll come back to that again, Jane, if you agree. Let's talk about different stages of development. We spoke about children who are impacted by this. I'd like to say a few words about teens. Teenagers are in a very tender time of their lives. This is a time that they're trying to establish their identity that is independent of people around them, of their parents. And their existence and their development and their sense of happiness and belonging and thriving depends on how they relate to their peers. And in this case, we know that based on physical distances, and I'd like to come back to this concept of physical distancing, because sometimes it has that particular concept and practice has been referred to as social distancing, which I'd like to take issue with. But anyway, because of this physical distancing, teenagers are deprived of their regular interactions with peers. They're not very happy about it. They have issues pertaining to grades, concerning their college work or work that is towards college entrance. And this is the time, most importantly, that teenagers start understanding the concept of romance, of special relationships in their lives, and do this physical distancing that has gone through a major, I guess, transformation. Now that relationship, special relationship building, romantic relationship building has been impacted. And that is another source of unhappiness for them. Dr. Jane, let's start talking now about adults. What do you have to say about middle-aged adults, the sandwich generation between children and teens and their parents?
Mm-hmm. In terms of, are you thinking, Dr. Kaftarian, coping, how they're coping or what they're going through?
Yeah, let's first talk about what they're going through. What are the pressures that they're enduring in that condition, and then forward and talk about some of the coping practices that will be helpful.
Sure. You know, our daily routines have been disrupted. Many of us are not working, and if we are working, we're working from home. It's that disruption of predictability, having that meaningfulness in your life. If you were working and now you're suddenly not working, or you've lost your job, or you're working part-time, that sense of security and the unknown is causing much anxiety for people. And when will this end? When will it be safe enough for us to go back to work? What will that look like? Is a very pressing factor. You know, just the changes that we've all experienced affect each of us differently. Some of us are coping better than others.
You know, I was thinking of the fact that now parents not only need to be concerned about the care of their children in a different milieu, in a different setting, but they are also responsible for the homeschooling of their kids. Children, teenagers have to do distance learning. This is a concept, this is a method that is new. That is new to the most of the world. Not very many people used to do homeschooling for their children. They, in the morning, children woke up, we all woke up, children were given breakfast, taken to school, and the entire academic experience happened in the context of the school system, right? In the classroom. And they went from one classroom to the next, from math to social studies to whatever it was, languages, etc. They had snacks in between, they had a lunchtime. It was all structured, correct? And then they had recesses. At the end of the school, they came home, and it continued. The continuation in terms of, in some cases, children had extracurriculars like music lessons, or they participated in sports, etc. All of that is gone. And of course, playing outdoors with friends on the street or in the backyard, etc., that has been impacted. So that middle generation, the parents of these children, who are now seeing the pressures of caring for their older parents, aging parents in some cases, have to deal with this new situation with their kids, the homeschooling, the homework, and the scheduling of things. Let's talk a little bit about setting new schedules for ourselves in the absence of the previous routines that we had to follow. Can you say a few words about that?
Sure. You know, you're so correct. You know, it's adapting our ways in a very fluid time. That daily routine creates, I believe, an anchor for people. It really establishes predictability, and a structured daily schedule promotes that sense of safety and contentment, whether it's for ourselves or for our parents or grandparents, our loved ones. That schedule, a daily schedule, a written daily schedule, creates that sense of anticipation of what will occur during the day. And it also creates and heightens that sense of importance of those items on the schedule. So it gives that person some sense of meaningfulness, because it's a redefined meaningfulness for all of us. So, for example, placing a daily walk on the schedule, whether it's in half an hour, 15 minutes, once or twice a day, is something tangible, and it's something that yourself, as well as your older person living with you, that older adult can experience, as well as feel that he or she's accomplished.
Actually, in fact, that is also very important for children, right?
Now, absolutely, for everybody.
A new normal for them, a new scheduling that it should be treated as just as important as when they had to go to school and they had to follow the schedules that were monitored by other systems, by the school system, by the extracurricular people, etc. And it's very important for kids to have that sense of new normal that a parent needs to maintain for the sake of the child, as well as for their own sake, because we all as adults experience the pressures of this new experience. And not only we have to adhere to new things, but that we have to be the managers of setting the new normal for those that we care for, those that we're responsible for. So let's talk a little bit about some of the distressing situations or feelings that people have. For example, I will start this by saying that some people have sleep disorders. You know, they wake up in the middle of the night. And by the way, this is a very difficult time financially speaking. And what about that parent who wakes up in the middle of the night and starts worrying about their finances, or starts worrying about the consequences of this experience? What advice do you have, Jane, for people like that who have sleep disorder as a result of this experience?
Yes, this is occurring, and it's very common. These are symptoms and signs of distress, of the stress. So acknowledging that fear, acknowledging that worry, and putting it down on paper during the day. Many of my patients will spend 15 minutes or 30 minutes a day just writing down on paper not so much on the computer, but the physical writing of getting it out on paper so that they get everything out, what they're worried about, and look at that list. And it should be what we call more like a cognitive behavioral intervention, where we're limiting it to 15 minutes to 30 minutes a day. And so it's contained within that half an hour, everything you're worried about. It's really what clinicians call having a meeting with yourself. And having a meeting with yourself will reduce some of that anxiety because you're going to come up with solutions.
Actually, that is such a great advice, Jane, to our friends who are listening to us. Absolutely. When you put down your thoughts and worries on a piece of paper, they assume an independent reality. And you are in the position of looking at them tomorrow to see whether or not the worries that you had about a particular issue have panned out, whether they have gone away. Maybe they were not as dramatic as you thought. And the same is true with children, It's very, very important for us to talk to our children, for them to express themselves, for them to put their thoughts out so someone listens to them, and that they are given enough opportunities during the day so that they can express themselves. Sometimes children don't have the correct vocabulary, the appropriate vocabulary to express themselves. And so someone that I know who has small children has started the highs and lows of the day during dinner time. When they sit down to have dinner every evening, after eating, so the parent says, okay, everyone, let's go through the highs and the lows of today. What were things that made you happy? What were things that were interesting for you? So they go around the table and everybody says something. So the child now has that vocabulary for tomorrow, right? Even for today, she or he sees the parents say, today I really had a very pleasant experience when I looked outside and the sun was shining and my rose bush was blooming. So right there, you're enhancing the idea of looking around and trying to find pleasant things. So the child learns. This is modeling, right? The parent is modeling that. And also, very important is for the parent to model the expression of negative feelings. For example, the mother may say, and today I was a little worried because some of the statistics were not as pleasant to hear as I thought they would be, especially if they have teenagers at home. And then give the vocabulary, the so-called unspoken permission to the children or teens to start expressing their worries or their anxiety. Do you think that that's a good way to go about these conversations with teens and children, Jane?
I do. I completely agree. That is a very good way to manage the feelings and to be able to express them in an appropriate and positive way. Because they all, they need to learn how to do that. And this is something new for all of us. That can also be used and utilized for the older person too. So having some time to be able to express themselves and their fears, because that fear, as you know, can spread faster than the virus. And so really, what you're talking about is really tools for coping. How do you bridge, their fears, and how do you embrace where they are right now? Especially, it becomes a little more complicated too when the person has any kind of memory impairment, or if they have an Alzheimer's disease or some other type of dementia. The approach may be a little bit different with that person, depending upon where they are in their progression of their disease, but it still can be, a positive, experience.
Absolutely. And I would like us to actually address the issue that sometimes people call social distancing, but I would like to call it physical distancing, because this particular virus spreads very readily when people are close to physically close, right? Because it is through the nose and mouth and eyes, not so much the mouth, but the nose and eyes, that this contagion travels from one person to the other. That's why we have to wash hands, we have to have masks, etc. But this, which is now called social distancing, should be called physical distancing, because the bottom line is that we are social beings. We don't want to completely sever our ties with the society that we live in, our friends, our relatives, our neighbors, those that we care about, those who care about us, our children's friends. So it is really very important for us to know that during this physical distancing time, when we absolutely have to maintain the physical distance, that social connections can still happen. We have the facility, the tools and the facilities for calling each other. We are now using the Zoom. The Zoom is a technology that has connected Dr. Mahakian, who is in Orange County, to me, and I live in Los Angeles County, to Astrid, who lives in Yerevan, and to other colleagues on the call from Moscow and London. There are so many places that are being connected through the Zoom. I know parents that are doing Zoom-based birthday parties. Everybody gets on the Zoom and they sing a birthday song for the person who's having a birthday that day. So right there, you feel validated and connected. You're not by yourself. And this connection is as important for adults as they are for children and teens and the elderly. Can you tell us a little bit about how we can actually make sure that those elderly that are not living with us, that we connect with them, that somehow we let them know that they're not alone?
Absolutely. Well, again, the FaceTime, the Skype, the Zoom can all be used as a daily way to connect to your loved one. I do have patient families who are sending cards, small gifts in the mail, telephone calls, having that person write a list, if they're capable of doing that, of all of the people they'd like to connect with, maybe old friends they haven't connected with, current friends, new friends. It may be the priest, the pastor. It may be their primary care doctor that's going to be on that list. So suddenly that list of connections is something tangible and that person can see. I do have patient families who are meeting with their parents in the parent's own home, but practicing that and I prefer what you call, Dr. Kaftarian, the physical distancing. So the daughter is sitting in the backyard, and the mom is in the kitchen, and there is an open door, and they're visiting that way.
For Easter, Dr. Mahakian, I know families that had Easter dinner together. So what happened, actually in my family, my daughter who lives in London orchestrated this for us. So she created this time. We dealt with the time zone differences. There's 8 hours difference. So we connected with them when they were having their dinner and we were having our lunch. And so together, 3-4 families, we had an Easter dinner. Everybody ate their own dinner in their own homes, thousands of miles away, but we were still together. We were asking each other who the others were eating, etc. Let's now talk a little bit about nutrition, exercise, and alcohol and drug use. These are such important topics for this very stressful time that are going to reduce the impact of the stress. Would you care to say words about that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. That you are absolutely right. That healthy lifestyle, whether you've had one before COVID-19 or you're going to make one today, it's never too late to start adopting and creating a healthy lifestyle, because that healthy lifestyle will impact the healthy brain functioning. So it all goes together. So absolutely, that exercise is number one. Exercise. Being out in nature, if you can, weather permitting, being out in nature and walking is the number one exercise. Stretching, walking, swimming, light hiking, these are all things that you can do outside, or bicycle riding if it's safe.
Dr. Mahakian, even in fact, stepping out on your balcony, if you don't have a backyard or you're in an apartment building, you can, if you have, open the window and hang out out the window for a while. So during the day, expose yourself to a lot of light. Turn on the light in the house, in your apartment, where you live. Make sure that there's a lot of light surrounding you during daylight, so that later on in the evening, you will be able to sleep better. So if you can't walk because it's not permitted in your area, just try to expose yourself to sunlight as much as possible and go that route. I know that a young family has emptied out their garage, and now the kids are running around in the garage in that space during rainy days. Or if you have a backyard and the kids can run around a little bit, take turns with your neighbors. If there's only one backyard, maybe one family can use it for half an hour, and then they can go in and the other family comes out and runs around. So yeah, these are very important. Nutrition. Good nutrition doesn't mean eating a lot. It means eating a balanced meal. And also, let's talk about alcohol, the use of alcohol and drugs during this stressful time when people are trying to do whatever they can to relax. Words for us about that?
Well, sure. As you know, not reducing smoking or stopping smoking. Smoking is very, very bad and for the cardiovascular as well as for brain health. Alcohol use is definitely something that you don't want to do, because it creates a lot of inflammation, and it becomes, as you know, very problematic. It can become addiction. So you really want to focus on those things that are healthy. If you can't, like Dr. Kaftarian was saying, go outside, you can also look at YouTube for exercise. And there are many different yogas and meditation and stretching that you can do in your home or apartment. But you definitely want to focus on those things that are healthy for you, for physical as well as mental and cognitive health.
Absolutely. And, music does a lot. We know that in Armenia, people are really very connected with all forms of art, especially music. So running music throughout the day in your household is very important. Learning new skills, doing things that have been postponed, like cleaning out things and closets, etc. Learning skills, learning new ways of cooking or baking, what have you. Again, these are all activities that can be instituted in your daily life to make sure that your time is taken up by positive rather than negative experiences. I would like us to now talk a little bit about news. this is another area that I think is very important for all of us to focus on and to be aware of. Nowadays, the news about COVID-19 is pretty bleak. It's all full of how many cases, new cases, old cases, fatalities, this and that and the other, where at the extent of its spread. What I would like to promote with our audience, and as I do with my family and friends, is that news is important only to the extent that you know what's going on and no more than that. So once or twice a day, if we connect to a news source, whether it's the radio or TV or what have you, and just figure out what's happening for a few minutes only, and then turn off the news. Because first of all, every time you see a review, hear a review of what's going on, it has an emotional impact on you. It puts pressure on you. It makes you feel depressed, and you don't want that. And even more importantly is that I don't know about the rest of the world, but we have a lot of controversy and a lot of political discord and fighting around COVID-19 and how it should be handled and whether or not there are cures and vaccines and tests, etc. These are squabbles and discussions that as regular people, we really don't want to be a part of. It's not something that we're going to solve. Therefore, why be a part of that? Because those can be very depressing and not pleasant. So let's stick to pleasant movies, music. If you like art, paint something, do something, sew something. Try to stay away from negative sources of information. That's my motto with my family. How about you, Dr. Mahakian?
I completely 101% agree with you, Dr. Kaftarian. A dear friend of mine in Rhode Island, Manu, I was speaking with him yesterday, and we were talking about humor during this time and watching humor on television, going back to comic strips in the newspaper. How many of us have really had the time to do that? So building in some humor, building in those positive things that you're doing during the day, and connecting with those positive people in your life. It could be making a new friend that you're on Facebook and you're now connecting with, on the telephone, on Facebook, on Messenger, LinkedIn. It's really all about, brightening your day. And as you said, simply opening those blinds to brighten the mood, calm the anxiety, have fresh air come in creating that energy in the home with music will affect us. It does affect us on many levels.
Yeah, thank you for confirming that for me, Jane. Those are important skills to have and to practice. I would like us to reflect on children. Back to children during unusual times, uncertain times, changing time. Oftentimes we see that our children sort of digress in their development. For example, a child may start bedwetting or behaving in a way that is unusual for that child. For example, excessive crying or temper tantrums, etc. Some of that is, we have to be patient. Some of that is the result of this experience, although I hope that in small kids, this experience, the pandemic experience, would not be very pronounced. And because of that, I want to urge our parents to be a little more flexible, to endure some of these changes a little better. For example, if a child has night terror, in the middle of the night runs to the parents' room and wants to get in bed with them, it's okay. For now, it's okay. It doesn't matter whether that child is 10 years old. It's still okay. Because if that's an issue, and if getting in bed with you or being, bringing the pillow and sleeping next to you on the floor is going to give him or her a good feeling, a feeling of safety, do it. Let it happen. So I would like us to be a little sensitive to those issues as well. Now, Dr. Jane, let's talk about pre-existing chronic situations, chronic illnesses, those who had pre-existing chronic problems such as diabetes, heart problems, high blood pressure, and or because we are psychologists, let's really focus on pre-existing mental health or emotional issues like anxiety from before, depression from before, and the fact that we were on particular regimens. We were on specific medication for, let's say, our depression, or special medication for our high blood pressure. Would you address that a little bit? You're on mute. You're on mute. Can you unmute yourself?
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So those issues, those medical issues definitely need to be in consultation with your primary care doctor or the specialist that has prescribed, let's say, medication for cardiovascular issues. And how do we reach those doctors? Many doctors here are doing telehealth or telephone, contacting the doctor, reaching out to the doctor and discussing those issues with him or her. But you're right, those are adults who've had these serious public health concern with is now heightened because of the autoimmune problem, any kind of neurocognitive problem, cardiovascular issues, other types of health problems that connect with having the person feel more depressed. That depression must be addressed, and it can be addressed through, there are now support groups online. There are caregiver support groups online. There are different ways that we can get support. And
Dr. Mahakian, since you're a gerontologist, could you say a few words about cognitively and elderly who have cognitive or memory impairment? Because in Armenia, I know you have started a whole new movement of the care for people suffering from dementia, Alzheimer's, etc. Please say a few words about your work briefly, because we're running out of time, about your work, about whether or not dementia can be handled in the best possible way, and how people in elsewhere, not necessarily in the States, can connect with your program for care.
Sure. No, thank you. I am in maybe 3-4 years ago, we started Alzheimer's Care Armenia. Alzheimer's Care Armenia is an NGO in Armenia, and it creates sustainable programs and services for people with dementia and their families. Last September, I created and did an extensive focus group. And the focus group was with leading physician, neurologist, to present this information to the Ministry of Health in Armenia, who's very supportive of the beginning work of creating a focus group, of looking at national programs to help families. They're very supportive. We work very closely with not only the Ministry of Health and the governmental agencies, but also other NGOs creating programs. The Healthy Aging Memory Club is very much supported by by Armenia's government, and these are creating programs and services for people with memory loss. The person, dementia and Alzheimer's disease is in Armenia. Worldwide, there's approximately 50 million people with dementia. But really, the idea is building the infrastructure, which I'm working with other organizations and the government, looking at a national proposal for planning for people with dementia, and working closely with also Alzheimer's International in London. But it's a multi-tiered approach, and it starts with building small programs and then building up.
Okay.
And
excellent.
Thank you.
So Jane, let's say a few parting words to close this very interesting session that I'm enjoying, but because of the fact that we're running out of time, I would like us to say a few parting words and hope that we will come back again and talk to our viewers and listeners. Any parting words for us pertaining to the elderly, because you're an expert in that area? If you had to say two things to families that are dealing with the elderly, what would they be?
Dr. Kaftarian, it really is all about focusing on what that older person can do, not on what they can't do, and making them feel as though they, even if they lack some capability, that they are effective in the world, and that will empower them.
I have to unmute myself. Yes. Excellent parting words, Jane. Excellent. So my parting words to our viewers and listeners is that everyone, please know, you're not alone. We are all in this together. This is a global experience. This is an unpleasant global experience, but this is not categorized as a catastrophe. Yes, there are financial issues that are impacting all of us. I'm not trying to minimize that or make that sound like a small and insignificant issue. Yes, we are all impacted by that. Some of us more than others. But this is a global pandemic where the health and pharmaceutical specialties are completely focused on. Every day we hear new news about finding ways to test better. They're working on vaccines, and they're looking as to how this can be controlled. Give yourself a sense of control by doing whatever it is that you need to do. Wash your hands, do the physical distancing, etc. Teach your child how to have a sense of control in terms of washing his or her hands and doing some of the things that they need to do to stay safe. But above and beyond that, let's not worry about it. Let's focus, let's be optimistic. Let's come to this from a positive perspective of knowing that the whole world is working to end this. This shall pass, and soon enough, we will enter another normal. That normal may be an altered normal situation, but it will be a normal situation for us to live under or live in. So please stay safe, stay healthy, and we're all in this together. With that, I'd like to say my goodbye. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Kaftarian, Dr. Mahakian. We have received 3 questions for you. I will read them, okay? First one is, could you please explain to a lay person what is happening with the body organism that leads to the development of dementia? Or what are the first signs?
That is a Jane, would you like to address that?
Thank you, Dr. Kaftarian. The first signs are are short-term memory loss. And short-term memory loss is one of the hallmarks of Alzheimer's type dementia, as well as many other types of dementias. So the short-term memory loss, some confusion, not being able to organize him or herself as they were doing before. And really not, if someone was social before, they begin to retreat inward. Sometimes you will see mood changes where the person will become more depressed, more flat affect. They may become more anxious. Their mood may become more, maybe tearful. The person may become more or laughing inappropriately. So these are all signs. Repeating oneself, asking for the information, not able to hold on to the information, and after a few minutes they ask again. So this is not normal aging. It is something that your first step would be to see the primary care doctor, who especially are gatekeepers. In Armenia, that primary care doctor is the gatekeeper. And then, of course, reaching out to the neurologists, whether it's here in the United States or in Europe or in Armenia.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mahakian. The next one is, are there any social experiments that help us understand how long a person can remain in the isolation that we face today?
Whenever we are dealing with a new situation, we try to fall back and use information from previous studies. For example, if there is an earthquake and we want to find out how to deal with, let's say, post-traumatic stress disorder, or deal with grief, and learn and deal with all of the impacts of this experience on the person, we look to see if there are any studies that would be for catastrophes or for widespread big experiences, and try to use the lessons learned from those studies in the new situation. In the case of this pandemic, we have been looking at many different studies that were done on those other catastrophes, such as fires and earthquakes and man-made disasters such as wars, etc. And we know certain things that we can use. For example, we know that new traumatic experiences, such as this one, can be triggers for other experiences that people have had. For example, those people living in Armenia who are from Lebanon or from Syria and have been exposed to the feeling and experience of war. This pandemic experience could be a trigger. It can bring up some of those memories and terrors that they felt before. And so this is the kind of cross, I guess, experience that we draw from. In terms of this particular pandemic, this is, although it's a little similar or it has some commonality with other major experiences, such as, let's say, an earthquake, it is a bit different as well. In an earthquake, you have the intensity of the experience, 1 or 2 or 3 minutes of shaking or maybe longer, and then it stops. There is a huge devastation that people have to deal with afterwards. There may be a few aftershocks, but the intensity of that experience is gone. You now have to deal with the after effect of that experience. In the case of this pandemic, it's a very unlimited, seemingly unlimited experience. It's been going on for months. And there's lack of clarity as to when it's going to stop, when it's going to end, and how normalcy is going to come back to us. So the sense of uncertainty and lack of clarity about the future has made this experience a little unique. But we quickly say, as based on what we know about the human psyche and human experience, is that human beings, in generally speaking, are resilient. They adapt and cope. They adapt to new situation. They cope with difficulty. So, given the fact that this is long and seemingly limitless, is not a pleasant feeling or experience. But the understanding that this is a global experience and that a lot of effort is going into bringing it to normalcy, handling it the best possible way, should be the unique feature of this experience as well. So yeah, we do learn from other experiences, but this one is a unique one. And given the human psyche and human nature, we will deal with it as well as we can, and it will be okay. Any more questions?
Yes, thank you very much. We have the last one. Quarantine from the word 40 days, whether 40 days is really the maximum, how many people can remain psychologically healthy in isolation? Like,
I can repeat that question. I didn't hear that.
Sorry, I will mute you and try to repeat it, okay? So the question is, quarantine from the word 40 days, whether 40 days is really the maximum, how many people can remain psychologically healthy in isolation? Like,
I will say a few words and I will, Jane, go ahead. I have a few things to say, but I would like to hear from you too. Go ahead.
Well, I think bottom line, it's remaining positive and creating or thinking out of the box to bring in those, to make those connections, to do those things that make you happy, to realize that, as you said, Dr. Kaftarian, this is, this is a global experience and it will end. Everybody is working very hard on a solution for this. We don't know yet when, but we need to focus on the positive aspects of it. That will help us mentally. That will help us emotionally. Now is the time to maybe do things you haven't had time to do before, such as reading.
Right. I totally agree with you, Dr. Mahakian. Let me quickly add, I heard the term 40 days time limit. Let's not worry about this 5 days, 10 days, 40 days, 2 months issue. These are arbitrary numbers. These are arbitrary time lapses that we're talking about. Human beings are social beings. Whether you're an extrovert or an introvert, you still want to know that you are connected to your social settings, to those that are in your life. Instead of worrying about how many days have lapsed, let's focus on how we can go back and connect to others. As Jane and I mentioned, there are so many different ways to connect with others. Open the window, call your neighbor and have a chat. Pick up the phone and call your mother and reassure her that you're okay, that find out how she's doing. Have your child call their friends or have a Zoom meeting or a Zoom dinner or a Zoom birthday. Drive by someone's house when they have a birthday and honk the horn and say, hello, happy birthday, have a balloon in your hand and shake it. These are very simple and seemingly unsophisticated ways to deal with this, but believe me, these are effective ways to connect back with your social system. Forget about putting limits on the number of days, number of months. This is not as big of a deal as we hear. We should adhere to all the regulations of physical distancing to bring down the curves, and make sure our healthcare systems are able to take care of us if we can. But you know what? This shall pass. Focus on that. Don't worry about the days. That's all I have to say, Astrid, about that issue. Any more questions?
No, that was the last question. And I want to thank you very much, Dr. Kaftarian and Dr. Mahakian. You are doing the great job. Really, thank you for your time. I just want to add that everybody can watch the recording of our webinars and follow the new ones through the events calendar on our website, armenia2041.org. And the same you can find on our Facebook page. So thanks again to everyone for joining, and stay safe.
Thank you, Astrid, again for the invitation. Let me say that at the Armenian American Mental Health Association of Southern California, we have developed 9 or 10 different videos, webinar videos that address many aspects of this pandemic. We are very happy to share this with anyone who's interested. Some of them are in Armenian, some of them are in English. They span a very wide, a broad spectrum of topics. We have addressed domestic violence in the context of these videos as well. So I will send the links to Astrid, to you, and hopefully you will be able to make this available to the viewers and the listeners. With that, again, thank you, and stay safe and stay well. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you very much.